If you've worked in a corporate environment in the past 10 years, you've no doubt been exposed to the nightmarish hellscape that are corporate fad diets, things like Lean Six Sigma and Agile Scrum methodologies. Today, we're going to talk about what they are, why managers like them, why they're terrible, and why, for the love of all of the economic gods, we should stop using them. Agile methodologies and Lean Six Sigma practices have been around for a while in one form or another, but really exploded in the aughts and 2010s as go-to managerial concepts to boost productivity and employee engagement. Fun metagame for this: count all the times I use an impressive sounding buzzword that doesn't actually mean anything. I'd suggest you make it into a drinking game, but then you die, and that would be bad for my subscriber count. These methodologies arose because of a unique nexus point. We had companies that were growing very rapidly in a new technological age that made managing them difficult. We had increased expectations to squeeze all the productivity we could out of these newfangled computers. And we had a bevy of software that was spitting out reams and reams of data on said productivity. Growing out of the synergy movements of the 80s, managers were convinced that if they just read the data in the right way, they could make foolproof decisions that would make their companies perform better than the competition. Lean Six Sigma and eventually Agile filled the gap, offering training programs with belts and certifications that promised to turn dull middle managers into productivity-enhancing machines. And now, a decade or two later, they are absolutely everywhere. So how do these systems actually work? On the face of it, they don't sound all that bad, primarily focusing on two things: data analytics and planning. Pretty basic, healthy things for an organization to engage in. Lean Six Sigma is geared towards eliminating waste, streamlining pipelines until they reach maximum efficiency. They do this by collecting data and then making decisions based on that data. The thinking is that the data is empirical, it's fact, and therefore a trusted arbiter free from bias or interpretation. We'll get back to that. Agile, on the other hand, came out of the tech world and is based around rapid iteration and flexibility, using a mixture of data-driven decision-making, team building, and customer interaction to ensure development is on the right course, rather than simply checking in at the start and end of a build. Both of these systems sound like perfectly good ways to run a business, and training worth having for middle managers or product leads. And that's one of the reasons they're so subversive. They sound like easy methods to get to the desired goals. So what's the problem? If you're somewhere over the age of, say, 10, you've been exposed to more fad diets than we can collectively remember. There was the Atkins diet, the South Beach diet, the paleo diet. There's this thing a lot of people are into now called keto something or other. And then there was that batshit period in the 90s where we couldn't seem to decide if eggs were healthy or not, and if so, which part. But the thing is, you and I all know the secret to being healthy. It's diet and exercise. It's always been diet and exercise, and it's always going to be diet and exercise. But dieting sucks. Exercise sucks. Eating entire sleeves of Oreos and sitting on the couch playing video games is far more enjoyable. So we start looking for shortcuts to that one secret trick every blog tries to sell us. We know objectively that weight gain and loss is a simple calculation of calorie intake and outtake. We know that if you consume 2,000 calories but only burn 1,500, guess what? That other 500 is going to turn into fat. The only reliable way to lose weight is cut back the calories or burn more. But that's hard, and we want something easy. So some marketing guru comes along promising that if you eat nothing but milkshakes and birdseed, you can have one of those MCU bodies with a fraction of the effort. All fad diets are essentially snake oil, magic beans, a lie that we sell ourselves in the hopes of having a better future without having to work for it. So what does this have to do with Lean Six Sigma and Agile, Scrum, who's a what's it? These so-called methodology programs are the exact same thing, translated away from diets and to management and productivity. Managing people is hard. I should know. I've supervised at a whole bunch of different places. The largest team I ever had was 22 employees, and if I'm being completely honest, there were entire weeks when I forgot some of those people existed. I had direct reports who simply turned in their work on time and never got complaints about them. So I would straight up forget they were there. Like I'd turn the corner and see their desk and be like, oh crap, I'm supposed to be supervising that person. The point is that A, I'm a bad supervisor, and B, organizations can be large, complex, and multifaceted, all of which makes them difficult to manage. Just like with dieting, we know the solutions for this stuff already. Regular check-in meetings, reminders, and reports to make sure we're staying on top of everything. But those things are hard. They take effort. They take actual work when what I really want to be doing is screwing around on my phone or writing my next novel. So just like avoiding exercise, we look for shortcuts. We want some magic system that is going to do all of the hard work for us, that is going to give us a routine or system we can blindly follow and get the desired result without putting in the sweat to earn it. But what makes these systems so devious is that they are structured around the lie. They aren't just providing us with an excuse, they are actively helping us to deceive ourselves. Like a good magic trick, it all comes down to smoke and mirrors. The trick behind a good fad is rarely design, it's marketing. This is why programs like Lean Six Sigma and Agile Scrum bury all of their training in buzzwords, labels, and custom wording. Why have a training certificate when you can have a martial arts belt? Why talk about ad hoc development and planning increments when you can say things like Kanban and sprints? They can't just call these things meetings and reports because that would expose the lie of the diet. Agile is particularly rife with this stuff. You have quarterly planning ceremonies, retrospective ceremonies, stand-up ceremonies, but there's nothing ceremonial about it. These are just meetings, but they dress it up to add an inflated sense of value. If you hired a consultant on how to run your business and they said, gee, try having more meetings, you would fire that consultant. But ceremonies, well, that's just fancy. They have to convince you that what you're getting is worth the money. So you have ceremonies instead of meetings, epics instead of yearly goals, features instead of quarterly goals, and user stories, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean, instead of monthly or weekly goals. People have been breaking down planning by year and quarter since the dawn of agriculture. But a consultancy firm can't charge you for what you already know. These are just meetings, but by putting a fun label on it, they're trying to obscure how little you're getting for what you are paying. This is marketing. Buzzwords to sell you a product you don't need. This language exists to create an expectation of value and convince you that your organizations need such training. It intentionally obfuscates information to make it harder to understand and therefore justify the cost of training. It's creating false value. All this information is on Wikipedia, by the way. You don't actually need to pay for it. So if this is all stuff you already know, is that added layer of terminology and training really worth what you're paying for? Well, let's look at how much it actually costs. The physical cost, the actual dollar amount for these trainings, is astronomical. To give one example from my own career, I once worked at a government office consisting of around 140 people. This was an IT office, and Agile Scrum being all the rage, the higher-ups wanted the entire office trained on Agile Scrum methodology. This cost our office, which again was only 140 people, $7 million a year. I'm going to repeat that. $7 million a year to train 140 government employees. The line in the budget is literally labeled Agile Coaching for Product Teams, $7 million. Now, some of you will quite rightly point out that training is needed, that all of our organizations should be spending some amount of the budget on training, and I would generally agree with that. But in this specific instance, I think it's a colossal waste of money, both because Lean Six Sigma and Agile are terrible systems, as we'll discuss further in a bit, but also because the supposed benefit isn't proportional to the cost. A GS-13 in the federal government based in the DC area makes around $100,000 per year. Yet another $30,000 onto that for benefits. Benefits are calculated at like 31 point something percent. Maybe it's 4. It's just pi. It might just be pi. And let's say another $20,000 for office space, equipment, processing, training, and the like. And you get a pretty broad cost of $150,000 per year per GS-13 employee. So if we take that back in the napkin math and divide it by the $7 million we're paying for this fancy fad diet training, you get 46, meaning we could hire an additional 46 employees for the same cost of our fun buzzword training program. Now, admittedly, not every problem can be solved by throwing more people at it. Bottlenecks do exist, pipelines can break down. But if your office's problem is not being able to keep up with the work, what stands a better chance of fixing that problem? A training program that will take at least a year to implement at the cost of millions of dollars, or adding another 50 people to the office to handle the extra workload and collaborate on solutions. Or to look at that another way, for an office of 140 people, we were paying a third of our payroll budget just for this consultancy bullshit. And it's not just your budget that will feel the cost. Your organization does too. We don't just lose money on these corporate fad diets, we lose time and, yes, even productivity, the very thing the program was trying to improve. We spend way more time teaching and enforcing these systems than we ever get back from implementing them. For starters, the buzzwords and custom terminology to each program are themselves a cost and efficiency you rarely make back. This is one of the reasons I loathe resume speak, which I talked about in Rebuilding the Executive, and a topic which probably deserves a whole video on its own. When dealing with these programs, we have to take time to translate what we're doing into them, making our needs fit the system rather than the system meeting our needs. For example, my team, all of whom are very well paid, wasted a half an hour in one of these dojos. Yes, that's really what they call them. There's a whole martial arts training culture to these programs I don't have time to dive into here, in which we tried to figure out how basic activities like workforce management, hiring, interviewing, etc. would be translated into epics, features, and stories. Now, some of you who like these systems could probably sit down and think of a few solutions to this problem of how general administrative tasks could be documented and planned for. But that's my whole point. We were trying to take administrative and management tasks and shoehorn them into a system meant for IT development. You have to take time to twist and translate your needs to fit into their system, and you're paying for the privilege. I mean, technically we all are, because remember this is a government office, but you get my point. These examples go on, and this is only from one office I worked in. I could tell you about the time we spent weeks trying to get our entire organizational structure, budget, and assignments into a system called Rally, which looks like this, and ITRR, which I can't show you because all the information is internal. We were putting all this information in these systems to help track progress, to know how efficient we were being. But the only work we were doing was putting things into the system. So the productivity system was only measuring our productivity of putting things into the system. It's like that scene from WandaVision. Or the time we wasted an entire hour trying to come up with a team name. Yes, all these teams need fun names. Brief tangent. All these systems try and make themselves as fun and cool as possible. They want you to feel excited about the product, so you keep buying it. Thus, these folks encourage you to come up with cool team names for your projects, with the idea being that it will somehow help unit cohesion or make people happier to engage with the system overall. But organizationally, these things are entirely useless. For example, I've worked with IT offices at 2 different agencies that had names like the Avengers or the A-Team or the whatever. And you might think it's cool to be on The Avengers in the same way I thought it was cool to have an X-Men lunchbox. But the end result is just to confuse the hell out of everybody. If I look down at a budget, report, memo, etc., and see server maintenance team, I can reasonably interpret that this is the team that maintains servers. But if I look down on a budget and see The Avengers, what the hell am I supposed to do with that? Now I've got to memorize which stupid jackasses are on their stupid made-up team. It's completely counterproductive. And you paid $7 million for that lack of productivity. And it doesn't stop there. We spent hours and hours on our team mission statement, which was equally stupid, our community map, our unit structure, and so on. Now here's the real kicker, so pay attention. These documents, the mission statement and the like, were totally useless. No one was ever going to read them. But the conversation was not. Getting everyone in a room to go over basic questions like what should we be aiming for in our work, and who's going to handle which types of tasks, and how we are going to accomplish them is super useful. But you already knew that. Just like you know diet and exercise is what it takes to be healthy. We all know that if you need to build unit cohesion, one of the best things you can do is get everyone into a room together and hash out exactly who's doing what and why. So why are we paying $7 million, which again is only for one office, not the whole agency, to tell us what we already know? These fad diets never pass cost-benefit analysis. They take gobs of money and time away from our organization in the name of making it more efficient. But the marginal efficiencies gained never make up for what it cost us to get them in the first place. We spend weeks and months in these meetings building these systems and then working to maintain those systems, all in the hope that it will help us solve our problems rather than solving the problems themselves. Please forgive me one more tangent. When I was at USDA, we were having a huge hiring problem. Our attrition rates were through the roof, largely as a result of a large number of retirees and the secretary making some truly boneheaded decisions. To make matters worse, our hiring pipeline was totally broken. Hi, welcome to the federal government. We really suck at hiring people. So not only were we hemorrhaging staff, it was taking us far too long to hire replacements, making the problem that much worse. So how did we solve it? Did we spend $7 million a year on Six Sigma training and Agile and putting everything in a rally? No. We did the work, the hard way, the diet and exercise way. We sat down and mapped out every single step of the hiring pipeline, who was responsible for it and how long each step took them. Then we honed in on each of those steps, identified the blockages, and removed them to make the pipeline run more smoothly. We were still losing staff by the dozens, but now we had a better pipeline to get replacements in the door. We tackled the problem like rational, experienced adults and didn't have to waste millions of dollars on training that was never needed to begin with. And for all of these organizational costs, as much as your organization suffers, so too do the people who work there. Let's talk about the human cost. That's right, I lied. It's time for some more examples, but I swear these are relevant. And they both come from the same place, a truly evil corporation that I once worked for that owns like a dozen hotels in the DC area. These people were like cartoon mustache twirling levels of evil, but most of those stories are for another day. What I want to focus on in this video, is how embracing Lean Six Sigma and data-driven methodologies made them more evil, not less. See, everything at this corporation was driven by data. Remember a million years ago when we said at the start of this video how data is a fair arbiter of justice, and we get back to that? Yeah, that's this part of the video. Congratulations, you made it. This company in the hotel I was working at didn't just look at data to inform their decisions. They looked at data to make their decisions, which led to two very stupid things. That's right, a tangent within a tangent. At this point, we're like 4 tangents deep. The first was our marketing department, the people responsible for setting up corporate accounts and getting banquets and the like. Because I was a manager at this hotel, fancy me, I got to sit in leadership meetings where the head of marketing would do somersaults every single week to avoid getting fired. His gambit was actually quite simple and consisted of two parts. The first is that he never ever brought a number to the meeting that made him look bad. He would always bring numbers that showed improvement, even if they were entirely different numbers. So this week, he brings the number showing how many rooms we sold, and next week, he talks about how many banquets we booked, and the week after that, he'd talk about how much money those banquets made. He did this to avoid having to say that we sold fewer rooms or lost corporate accounts or that the numbers in any way went down. He selected the data that would fit the narrative he wanted to sell, i.e. that he was good at his job and shouldn't be fired, and refused to bring data that said anything else. And the second thing he did was to fire the worst performing member of his team for that month. This was his scapegoat, the person catching the blame. But because it was data driven and numbers were everything, he only ever looked at the current numbers. You could have an employee that knocked it out of the park 3 months in a row, but if they slipped up on that fourth month, guess what? They're fired. The turnover in that case was astronomical, as you might have guessed, and we could easily chalk this up to bad management, but it wasn't just him, it was the entire system they were trying to push. Which brings us to the human example. At the hotel, I was a front office manager, where the check-in desk is and stuff, and we tracked the hell out of every metric we could find. This was built out of Lean Six Sigma ideology. You know those surveys you take at the end of your stay asking who checked you in and how good they were and the like? Yeah, we have to read all that shit and crunch those numbers into reports. Now, those things get measured on a scale from 1 to 10. But the scale is a lie, because anything from a 1 to an 8 is a failure on the back end. You might think rating someone an 8 out of 10 is pretty good, but to the hotel, that's a person failing to do their job because they didn't make you disgustingly euphorically happy. This brings us to one of our front desk clerks. She was one of our best cashiers for like months, but she wanted to move over into marketing, the office with insanely high turnover. She was smart and attractive and had great customer service scores for months on end, so she applied and got turned down over and over again. Now, I suspect that's because she had brown skin and a Middle Eastern name and marketing really liked hiring blonde girls, but that's speculation on my part. Remember, cartoonishly evil. The employee was understandably pretty upset and her numbers started to slip. They didn't plummet. She was still getting 7s and 8s and 9s on the regular. She just wasn't getting 10s anymore. So my boss, who was, let's say, ruthless, to put it kindly, wanted to fire her. Not because she was bad at her job, we both agreed she was great, but because her numbers had gone down. When I pressed him on the numbers not really mattering because she was still very good at her job, he no joke said to me we should fire her because, and I quote, "She doesn't smile as much as she used to." Yeah, you moron, that's what happens when you repeatedly deny someone a promotion they deserve. Every single week the numbers would come out, and every single week I'd have to convince him not to fire her, until eventually she found the job she wanted somewhere else. This was stupidly inefficient. We were constantly firing people, leading to additional HR and training costs. Our employees were always miserable because they knew a single mistake could lead them to being fired, and the customers, who this was presumably all for, never even noticed. All in the name of chasing Lean Six Sigma practices, all in the name of better numbers that could be sent upstairs to impress the bosses. Data which only ever existed in the first place to help us do our jobs better, not define what that job should be. The data is not the story. The map is not the terrain. But these fancy trainings and their fancy labels obscure all that. They make everything about the system rather than the reality. The only thing that matters is the data, the labels, the adherence to this new religious dogma. They convince you that you'll get healthier by only eating raw meat or only eating chocolate chip cookies, seeking for shortcuts when we all know what we should really be doing. Eating our vegetables. These systems, their terminology, their belts and epics, only serve to make the illusion of progress. We like them because adjusting to the diet, having these meetings where we generate reports, and put structures into programs, and updating things to meet the new system feels like progress. In the same way that buying a bunch of supposedly healthy food feels like progress. You're not losing weight when you switch over to healthier foods, but you feel like you're on the road to losing weight. Exercise is hard, but buying diet soda or low-fat cookies lets us feel like we're working towards the goal of getting healthy without ever breaking a sweat. In the same way that me sitting down at a computer and putting our entire organizational structure into Rally feels like we're making progress towards a more productive office, without having to do the hard work of analyzing our processes or making tough decisions about where to improve things. Doing something feels better than doing nothing, but in reality only serves to further complicate and obfuscate an already difficult problem. Managers love these systems because it makes their lives easier and makes them look better to their bosses. Instead of coming into a meeting and explaining how they're going to fix a hiring pipeline, which is hard, they can say that they've put all the teams into Rally, which is easy. They'll claim that putting the data into this system will make the later work easier, but all they've really done is delay the work being done in the first place. The reality on the ground is that the team spends weeks, even months, chasing and updating these reports for the benefit of upper management instead of on the actual work the reports are supposed to be measuring. It never benefits those in the field, instead actively taking away time from mission-critical work, as they're stuck in dojos or spend hours feeding data into systems like Rally. Also that a middle manager somewhere can tap a slide deck or a dashboard and say, look at all the data we're generating. Look at the people who have earned their Power Ranger belts or Agile certificates. Look at all the progress we're making. Get me 7 middle managers with attitude. Except you haven't really made anything. Only an illusion, only more smoke and mirrors. That's right, I put a Power Rangers joke in my serious business video. Corporate fad diets are a trick we play on ourselves and a burden we place on our organizations to try and shortcut the hard work we need to do. And these companies are more than happy to sell us that illusion, that false dream, engineering their systems with lingo and jargon to obscure the true value. It is the exact same tactic motivational speakers use. We hear things like, don't bring the team to the work, bring the work to the team, and how these systems will make us empowered and how we'll deliver work efficiently and manage changing priorities. But these aren't lessons, they're bumper stickers. These overly broad phrases aren't specifically relevant to you or your organization because they can't be. Instead, they give you these corporate fortune cookies and expect you to do the work of translating it into something useful for your office. And you're paying for it. We all are. The culture of corporate consultants has descended into the public sector like a cancer over the past 20 years. I've seen it across multiple agencies within the federal government, wasting hundreds of millions of dollars a year that could go towards far better causes. The problem with the federal government is not its size, it's how it's run. It's bad leadership. Remember, the office I work in was only 140 people, and we were spending $7 million a year on this agile nonsense. Extrapolate that over the entire federal government, and we're looking at billions wasted on what is essentially corporate snake oil. Not only is this a tremendous waste of money, it all feeds into one another. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars getting people trained on Lean Six Sigma and earning their yellow belts and green belts like a kid's karate class in order to boost productivity. By the time all this training has been done, years have passed, millions have been wasted, and productivity is the same. So Lean Six Sigma falls out of vogue just in time for Agile to become the new hotness, leading the cycle to start all over again. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on fad diets that are going to be forgotten 5 years from now. These things are an illusion that allows upper management to claim progress and middle management to claim they're doing something about the problem, all while workers are forced to handle their existing workload on top of the meetings and reports necessary to make these systems work. We do need planning and we do need team building, but we need these things in ways that are related to the organization, ways in which we aren't paying an added fee for a brand label we don't need or to be told common sense approaches we already know. We need diet and exercise, not corporate fads. I'm Michael Aguero. Thanks for watching. If you want to find out more about how these things happen in the federal government and how we could go about fixing them, consider supporting the channel by picking up my book, Rebuilding the Executive. It breaks down how the federal government works from the very top down to the very bottom in an easy to understand and accessible manner, gives insight into the problems weighing down our current government, and offers solutions to how we can fix some of those problems. Links are in the description. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.